The science of biology is the study of life. By learning about biology, we can begin to understand the natural world which surrounds us, and also learn more about ourselves, how our bodies work, and how to make sure the earth is well taken care of, so that the natural processes which support human and all other life continue to work smoothly as they have over millions of years. To begin to learn about biology, we will first start by asking a very simple question. What is life? What is it that really separates the living from the non-living world? All living things share certain properties. All living things can grow, use food for energy, repair and maintain themselves, reproduce, undergo change, move, respond to their surroundings, and in the end, all living things will die. But how is the growth of a flower different from the growth of a crystal or an icicle? How is the movement of a jellyfish different from the way water moves in a stream? Or how is the reproduction of raindrops, which split in two as they fall, different from a living cell that divides in half? Let us take a closer look at life. Living things come in all sizes, shapes, and colors. Yet we should remember that life is really not a thing at all. Life is a special force found in living creatures who are themselves made up of many different organized parts. For this reason, biologists call living things organisms. All living organisms are made up of cells, which are the basic units of life, and are usually only visible, as seen here, under a microscope. Some organisms are made up of only one cell, but most are built from billions or trillions of living cells, linked together to form a single organism. All living things can grow, and to do this, they must bring lifeless materials together and then incorporate them into their bodies. Plants make food by combining lifeless water and carbon dioxide, using the energy of the sun. The newly made food created by plants now contains stored energy that came from the sun. Once food is made by this process, called photosynthesis, it can then be used to keep the plant's life processes going. The food energy can then be passed on to animals who eat plants. And in turn, the energy can again be passed on to animals who eat other animals. When food is used in this process, called metabolism, energy is released. Living things take food into their bodies to obtain energy to maintain their life processes. That is, to just keep life going. Some of this energy is also used so that they can grow larger. Living things are special because they grow from the inside out. Non-living things, like crystals, can also grow, but only by adding chemicals to their outsides. Another special feature of living things is that they can often heal injuries to their bodies. This crab is growing a new arm after losing his old one. Even a complicated non-living thing like this car cannot either maintain or repair itself. Probably the most unusual quality of living things is that they can reproduce. This means that all living things can make nearly exact copies of themselves. The simplest forms of life, one-celled organisms, just split into two halves as seen here, and then grow larger until they split again. But even though it looks simple, this is still a very complicated process. Non-living raindrops also split when they fall, but this process is much simpler than what happens in life. When a frog egg divides, it follows exactly the same complicated steps generation after generation. Occasionally, a tiny change takes place within a dividing egg. These tiny changes, although extremely rare, are very important. Because of them, living things have changed as the Earth itself has changed. It is because living things can change and adapt to their surroundings that the world today is filled with so many strange and wonderful creatures that seem to live in all sorts of unlikely places. One big difference between living and non-living things is that life is active. This means that living things are always responding to changes, both inside and outside of their bodies. Quite often, a response will result in movement. Movement could be so slow we don't notice it, like when a plant adjusts the position of its leaves to receive the best light. Or fast, like when a lizard gets too hot and moves into the shade for protection. Or when a thirsty flamingo needs water to stay alive and dips down to drink. As you can see, being able to respond and move helps preserve life. Non-living things can also respond to changes in the environment and are sometimes moved by it. The main difference here between living and non-living things is that living things can control their responses. What does it mean to control a response? A prairie dog feels hunger and decides to find some plants to eat. Or maybe the prairie dog is hungry and decides not to eat because he has noticed a dangerous hawk flying overhead. By doing this, he has controlled his response to being hungry. Another example of controlling the response to hunger might be choosing to eat one kind of plant instead of another just because it tastes better. Even functions of the body which are beyond our control, heartbeat for example, are controlled automatically. Running fast means that extra oxygen must reach the muscles. As a result, we breathe harder, more air is taken into the body, and the heart automatically pumps faster. Non-living things are just not able to respond and move in the complicated ways that living things are. One of the strangest things about life is that it doesn't last forever. To live means that at some time death will follow. All of nature depends on new life being nourished by the remains of dead living things. A tree grows tall, lives for hundreds of years, and then eventually weakens and dies. The dead tree is slowly converted into soil as it is eaten by insects, and finally is decomposed by fungi and bacteria. The old dead tree provides needed chemicals for the seed that sprouts in its crumbling remains. This is recycling, showing how life depends on death and the reusing of necessary chemicals. This natural cycle repeats itself year after year as the dead leaves of the last autumn shelter and nourish the tender shoots of new young plants in spring. Just to help remember what we have learned, let us review the properties of life. All living things can grow, use food for energy, repair and maintain themselves, reproduce, undergo change, move, respond to their surroundings, and eventually grow old and die. These properties are shared by all living things, whether plant, animal, or human, simple or complicated, large or small, in an ever-changing dance of life which stretches back in time over 2 billion years.